Hey folks, Mike from LI Flies Mike here, and today we're going to be tying a fly from one of my favorite fly tyers, Chris Windram and his American EO fly. So as always, the full list of materials will be down in the description below. We're going to get started here by tying on a weed guard. So this will be looped around in front of the hook point. So we're going to be tying this on in the back, right around the bend of the hook. And then later on we'll be tying this and securing it down by the hook eye. So we'll just place this off to the side for now. Next, the fly calls for some dumbbell eyes. I'm just figure 8 tying these on here. These are some large lead painted dumbbell eyes. This will be covered up later by the spun ram's wool that we're going to turn into the head. So next we're going to take some bucktail and tie this in right around where the hook point is. We're going to be tying a flatwing tail on this fly. Now you could certainly tie any sort of feather tail, synthetic materials. Traditionally the fly called for a rabbit strip tail, a wide cut rabbit strip. But after talking to Chris, the fly is definitely quite heavy with the spun ram's wool head and the rabbit strip. I decided to do something a little different and tie a flatwing tail. We're just going to be tying on 2 or 3 pieces of lawn white saddle hackle, then some flash, taking some pearl flashabou here and looping this on. And then I'm just going to go ahead and tie a yellow and olive hackle on top. Again, tying our flatwing tail, making sure they're sitting nice and flat. This will give us some great action in the water. If you don't want to tie a flatwing tail, you could always use synthetic materials like slinky fiber. You could just use lawn bucktail. You could probably make an extension with mono and tie some bucktail if you'd like. So you could feel free to do whatever you like with the tail. So in front of this, I'm going to be tying some Squimpish hair. Now because we have the mono loop that's going to be on the bottom, I'm not going to be tying material on the bottom here for this collar section. So I'm essentially tying white on the sides to get some nice body and profile to help fill up this tail. And then we're going to be tying some olive Squimpish hair on top. And because we have those nice lawn flat saddle hackle out the back, I'm making sure that this is tied about 1 inch or 1.5 inches shorter than the end of the saddle hackle so we could see those feathers dangling out the back. I'll just give this a quick brush over so I can see what I'm working with here. Essentially for the rest of the fly here, we're going to be spinning ram's wool. If you've ever spun deer hair, it's very similar. We're just going to be taking our ram's wool, pulling the shorter hairs out. And then instead of tying it on top, I actually like to open it up. This is how Bob Popovic tied his silicone flies. And what we're going to do is essentially open it up almost like a flower petal. And then we're going to take the ram's wool and put it over the hook shank and then essentially tie it down somewhere right in the middle. You see here I went a little bit longer with this collar because this is the transitional section from the Squimpish hair to the spun head. So I always like to tie this collar longer in the rear section so it's going to have a nice transition or taper to it. But from here on out, pretty much all of the hair will be tied directly in the middle. And then what you do is you fold the hair back kind of like a hollow tie, making sure to create a little section for your thread to come through, and then you wrap in front of it. And that's essentially how you spin ram's wool. It's not too different from spinning deer hair, but there's none of that tension, so you kind of have to manipulate the material yourself. So now we're just going to fill up the body here and work our way up towards the eye. Always make sure you pull out those smaller guard hairs, that tufty material, so that way you have less to deal with when you're tying on these collars. And we want to make sure that we have minimal thread wrapping so we don't build up too much thread in between the collars. So I'm only going to be tying about 4 or 5 times, being sure to wrap it down fairly tight before folding it back. Real quick, I wanted to shout out our new YouTube members and my Twitch subs. Thank you so much. The support means a lot. It helps me create videos like this on the regular. And shout out to all of you watching this video right now. Just watching and leaving a like or comment really helps with the analytics for the channel. When you get to the dumbbell eyes here and we've filled up the collar, I'm just going to tie essentially right on top and right on bottom behind the eyes here. We want to fill this area around the eyes in as tightly as we can, so when we go to trim the material, we're not going to see any gaps. Being certain to wrap in front of our ties and not on top. We're going to just move forward here in front of the dumbbell eyes. So now essentially the same thing we've been doing. We're going to tie our ram's wool here, and we're just going to fill in the area, making sure that we've packed this hair in pretty tight, using minimal thread wraps so you don't end up with a gap around our collar here. Now it's time for our mono weed guard. So we're going to take the mono, and I like to loop it through my Regal Revolution head here. It makes it a lot easier. And then I'm just going to secure it down with 1 or 2 wraps, and I can kind of adjust it to get the positioning right and the distance from the mono. You want to make sure you have a little bit of distance from the hook point in the mono, so there is some give when you hit a piece of structure for that mono to help kind of guide the hook over without getting stuck. Securing this mono down and then cutting it as neatly as possible so we don't end up with too much excess. We're going to go ahead and tie 1 more collar in here, filling up the last part of our head. Throw a whip finish on here so we can start picking out this head and get ready to trim it. I'm just taking a brush here to kind of help start the process, but the majority of what you're going to be doing here is taking a bodkin or some sort of very fine needlepoint metal tool and picking out the hair. Now, you don't want to go all the way down to the thread where you tied it in, but you want to start out fairly close to the hook shank and then pull outwards. You see me going 360 degrees around the hook shank here. So what we're doing here is essentially cleaning up the hair because the hair gets folded in on itself. We're essentially almost using like a hair pick to create an afro on the fly almost. So now that the hair is nice and picked out and is not folded in on itself, we can start trimming the head of the fly. I like to angle my scissors outward so I can slowly adjust the profile here and not trim too close, because you can never add material. You can always take more off, but you can never add material back to the fly. So be careful not to trim too much here. So carefully going around the fly here, just starting to get the shape of the fly. We can always slowly go around and start perfecting the shape here. And I'm going for kind of that traditional American eel tapered head, right? So it's important to slowly spin the fly here, and you can kind of use your background to get a good idea if there's any hair sticking up in any places. And again, you can adjust the angle of your scissors. I always try to have them slightly angled outwards. And then we can start perfecting the head here. If you see any areas that are slightly raised, you can go back and hit them. Just be careful not to trim too much. It's a slippery slope when trimming these heads. Just get a quick look here. Give it a little brush out so we can get that transitional area of the ram's wool and the Squimpish hair kind of blended together. Make it a little more natural looking. After brushing, just clean it up a little bit, and I think we're ready for some head cement. You can see me pulling the hair back here so I avoid getting that head cement on the ram's wool. Well, there we go. That's Chris Windram's American Eel. Now, I threw my modern take on here with some Squimpish hair and a flatwing saddle hackle tail. The fly traditionally was tied with a rabbit strip tail, and I guarantee you it probably has fantastic action. The combination of the rabbit strip and the ram's wool probably makes a little bit of a heavier fly, so to help alleviate that, we use some natural and synthetic materials for the tail. This fly will push a lot of water with that ram's wool head. It'll also have some nice jigging motion with that lead dumbbell eyes tied on top. The addition of a weed guard on this fly helps you stop from getting snagged when fishing around structure or with sinking lines. And I think overall this is a great fly. I'm going to be fishing this in the back bays here. We have a lot of juvenile eels around this size in the creeks that striped bass will target during the summertime. Well, my name is Mike from LI Flies Mike. We have new videos coming out every week as well as live fly tying on Fridays. Thank you so much for taking time and watching the video. If you enjoyed, please feel free to leave a like or maybe subscribe to the channel. Again, we have a ton of new videos coming out every week. So thank you so much. Till next time, tight lines.